In this video, we'll be going over everything new coming in Phase 2 of Wrath Classic. Let's get the big news out of the way first. Race and faction change in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. Blizzard released a statement back in August confirming race and faction change for Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and I quote, Blizzard says, "While it won't be ready for our launch in September, we have changed our minds on this and we're working on adding the race and faction change as a paid service in a future patch. Originally, we planned not to offer race and faction change at all, because it felt like it removed some of that fantasy feeling of having dramatically different physical attributes that affect your gameplay. We were also a little worried about players chasing the flavor of the month in terms of racial abilities. However, we're convinced by the argument that being able to play with your friends is more important and that you should be able to bring your accomplishments with you when you do." This turns out to be the same trade-off provided by transferring between realms, which is already available as a paid service, so it makes sense to make the same decision with respect to race and faction change. In short, this fits our aim to nurture and protect social experiences. Remember, that's a pillar. All right, back to the quote. So we'll work on it for an upcoming patch. And while this statement alone doesn't confirm race and faction change for Phase 2, we also saw in November that icons for race and faction change were added into the Wrath of the Lich King Classic PTR build based on data mined information. So while it's not confirmed, data mined information has actually been very, very accurate historically for Wrath Classic. So if you want to start making plans to maybe change faction or race, that functionality could be coming in Phase 2. Now, one of the big new changes coming in Phase 2 also is the beginning of the Argent tournament. The Argent Crusade have taken a foothold in the northeast coast of Icecrown and have begun constructing the tournament grounds. The Argent tournament grounds are being built, but you can find a number of daily quests there that reward gold and aspirants seals. These seals are used to undergo the aspirants challenge and become a valiant. You can gain only 5 aspirant seals per day, so it takes a minimum of 3 days to gather the 15 needed to undergo the aspirants challenge. So it's worth doing these dailies each day once they're out and begin working your way up the ranks there. And the next big raid tier being released in Phase 2, of course, is Ulduar, and we'll be getting pre-nerf Ulduar. So even if you think that this raid is a breeze, you might be surprised. But with the pre-nerf Ulduar, we're also going to be seeing buffed gear that drops from it. Blizzard is planning to increase the item level of the gear that drops in Ulduar, and along with that item level, a actual increase in the stats on the items that drop from it. The current plans are to increase Ulduar 25 normal item level by 6, placing it at 232 item level, which is 6 item levels above Kel'Thuzad, Sartharion, and Malygos 25 gear. Along with the normal buff, hard mode Ulduar gear will be getting buffed by 12 item levels, putting it at 251 item level, which means that Ulduar 25 hard mode gear will be higher item level than Trial of the Crusader 25 normal gear, which is 245 item level. Now, Blizzard has mentioned that weaving item level ranges between raid instances is something that they like and they want to continue to do in order to encourage running multiple different raids per lockout period. But it really wasn't like this back when Wrath was retail, because when Trial of the Crusader came out, that gear that dropped there was just so much better and easier to get than Ulduar gear that everyone just stopped running Ulduar, which is why this time around we're going to see that happen differently. This item level increase is going to encourage players to continue to raid Ulduar after Trial of the Crusader comes out in Phase 3, and we're going to probably see people still run Ulduar. Now, as a refresher, hard mode loot in Ulduar does not have its own completely fleshed out higher item loot tables. The loot tables are actually the same as if you fought the boss in normal mode, but each boss will drop 1 extra piece of gear at a higher item level, which adds up to roughly a dozen pieces of additional gear that you can get from the raid if you defeat each boss on hard mode. Now, the one exception to this rule is Algalon, which does have an entire chest full of hard mode gear, making him pretty much one of the most valuable bosses in Ulduar to defeat each week for your guild. Algalon made it on my top hardest bosses in Wrath list, so you can definitely bet some guilds are going to struggle with this boss though. And with the new raid tier comes new achievements, mounts, and titles in Ulduar. So there are 5 new achievement titles and 2 new mounts with Ulduar. You've got the Rusted Proto Drake, the Ironbound Proto Drake. These are the rewards from the Ulduar meta achievements, 10 and 25 man respectively. There's also the title The Astral Walker from defeating 25-man Algalon, Starcaller from defeating 10-man Algalon, and Herald of the Titans title from defeating Algalon without anyone wearing gear with a higher item level than is available in 10-player Ulduar. The other 2 titles, Conqueror of Ulduar is Ulduar's version of the Immortal, and Champion of Ulduar, which is Ulduar's version of the Undying, so the 25-man and 10-man versions respectively. Now, I'm really excited for Phase 2 because it's gonna really seem a lot like Phase 2 TBC, if you ask me, where pre-nerf KT and Vosh would give give guilds a ton of trouble. It was a big jump in difficulty, and you know, especially since with how easy phase 1 Wrath has been so far, I think it's going to make Wrath much more exciting. But if you are worried about Ulduar being too difficult, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because the increased item level of gear is going to make it easier this time around. So if you get a few good weeks of gear drops, then the difficulty is going to go down over time. But that's not the only new raid content coming in phase 2. There will also be a new boss added to the Vault of Archavon in phase 2 called Emelon the Storm Watcher. Like Archavon, Emelon will drop tier chest, hands, and leg pieces, but they will be tier 8. Emelon will also drop the new Furious Gladiator pieces in 25 player and Deadly Gladiator pieces in 10 player, along with 2 emblems. Definitely a great place to gear up fresh 80s in phase 2. In other PvE news, Blizzard will be implementing Titan Rune heroic dungeons in phase 2, which many have begun to call Heroic Plus dungeons. These new Heroic Plus dungeons drop 10-man epics from the phase 1 raids, and the gear that drops from 10-man raids will now drop 25-man gear. This also means that 25-man raids will now drop 1 extra item per boss in phase 2. Heroic dungeons can be activated by having the group click and channel a new mysterious object, which grants all monsters in the dungeon 100% increased health and 30% increased damage, along with a dungeon specific buff. I've ran these Heroic Plus dungeons on the PTR a few times, and honestly it's really not that hard at all. Even with the blue gear, I think it'll be a great catch-up mechanic for fresh 80s looking to get geared fast without having to go into raids. Not to mention, the bosses in Heroics will drop Emblems of Valor, and the Heroic Daily Quest will reward Emblems of Conquest in phase 2, making these Heroics pretty valuable. And last, in phase 2, we'll have a new arena season. Our gladiators from phase 1 will be rewarded with the Deadly Gladiators Frostworm, which looks amazing, and we're going to have some changes as well. Blizzard announced that they're aiming to make climbing the arena ladder and purchasing arena gear easier this time around. After monitoring player rating, the percentage of players who reach the rating required to purchase all the gear, which the highest rating requirement is 2,000 for the shoulder piece, is much lower than what they want. So Blizzard is going to be implementing a rating adjustment, which will cause an increase in MMR, which they hope will allow more players to unlock all of the arena gear. And as most PvP players in Wrath know, PvE gear plays a large part in PvP, with items like Bryn Troll, Death Charger's Will, and so on being extremely powerful in PvP. And then with Ulduar gear getting buffed, you might be worried that, wow, Ulduar gear is going to replace PvP gear. Well, Blizzard has addressed this and commented that PvP weapons will be getting buffed so that they are at a similar power level to weapons dropped in Ulduar. However, there is no news on any other item slots yet, just on weapons, so we could be seeing a lot more PvE gear in arenas in phase 2. And that's everything. If you like this video, you might like this one on your screen. I'll see you there.